Once you make history, you can't take it back. We didn't know about history being all black.
A heritage of hardship and legacy of resilience.
So much of our history as Black women, especially in classical dance, is not documented.
The hope to integrate Black history and American history as one and fulfill America's founding principles that all people are created equal.
It's extraordinary, this sort of moment that we're living through.
This is a Pix 11 special, honoring Black history, mind, body, and soul.
Hello and welcome to this Pix 11 special honoring Black History Month. I'm Kori Chambers. We're here in Harlem at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. It's one of the world's leading institutions devoted to the preservation and research of the African American experience. Historian Arturo Schomburg dedicated his life to collecting and promoting the artistic and academic work of people of African descent. In fact, poet Langston Hughes' ashes are buried beneath this mosaic cosmogram. Back in 1926, it was another historian, Carter G. Woodson, that came up with the idea of celebrating the history and achievements of Black Americans. The idea evolved into what is now Black History Month, a time to reflect on the centuries of struggle and racial inequities in this country. That brings us here to the 21st century. Dr. Dwight McBride is a leading scholar of race and literary studies and the president of the New School. And he says there's still a lack of reverence and respect for Black history, but he does see glimmers of hope.
There's a lot of richness happening in the cultural world. That's the thing that keeps me optimistic.
Also helping to rewrite those history books is the first African-American principal dancer with the American Ballet Theater. Of course, we're talking about the incomparable Misty Copeland, who has defied stereotypes and broken barriers for young girls of color. She's not afraid to talk about racism in the world of dance and credits the women before her who paved the way. Ayanna Harry sat down with the dancer to talk about her legacy.
On ballet's biggest stages, she's known for her graceful steps and for her outspoken activism.
Being a voice for so many that haven't been given the platforms and opportunities.
The first Black principal dancer for the American Ballet Theater, Misty Copeland has spent much of her career defying stereotypes and breaking barriers.
I think it's amazing that when people think of ballet today, that they think of a Black woman and they think of me. But I am by no means the first Black ballerina to exist.
In her latest book, Copeland tells the stories of the trailblazing Black dancers who came before her. Black Ballerinas, My Journey to Our Legacy.
I wouldn't be in this position if it weren't for so many that slowly opened doors.
Including one of Copeland's mentors, Raven Wilkinson. A Harlem native, Wilkinson was the first African-American woman to be admitted to a major American ballet company. She graced stages across the country, including in the Jim Crow South in the 1950s.
When I first learned of her story, I think it was the first time that there was a shift in how I saw my career and how I saw what was possible.
Black Ballerinas highlights 25 unsung heroines of classical dance. They persevered despite racism, pushed back against preconceived notions of what a ballerina should look like. Copeland has worked on the research for this book for her entire career.
This is not something that you can Google. That's the problem, and that's the reason I wanted to write this book, was to have true documentation, to write our own history books, because so much of our history as Black women, especially in classical dance, is not documented.
And while the ballet world has traditionally been slow to embrace diversity, Misty Copeland believes change is finally on the horizon.
The biggest steps and movement that I've seen has been in the past 2 years, in the pandemic, which has been a really trying time for everyone, but especially in the arts and for stage performers. And then after the murder of George Floyd, this has been the most movement in my 20-year professional career.
Copeland says new conversations are beginning to examine what inclusion in ballet might truly look like.
The discussions around the color of shoes that the dancers are wearing and the tights that the dancers are wearing that are representation of their skin color, which is something that has been a conversation but never actually been truly addressed.
With so many performances canceled or delayed over the last year, Copeland is also focused on giving back to her fellow dancers.
At the beginning of the pandemic, I started a relief fund called Swans for Relief, where I brought dancers together from all over the globe to raise money, not just for dancers here in America, but for dancers globally who were, had challenging times financially, keeping food on the table.
Coming up, he made history facing off against an all-white college basketball team during an NCAA championship in the 1960s. And he's still making a difference coaching high school basketball in Spring Valley, New York. We'll be right back with that story.
Dancer, choreographer, and director Alvin Ailey Jr. created his dance troupe in 1958 to nurture black artists and express the universality of the African American experience through dance. Combining theater, modern dance, ballet, and jazz, his choreography continues to spread global awareness of black life in America.
Welcome back to this Pix 11 special honoring black history, mind, body, and soul.
In 1966, college basketball was almost completely segregated. But that all changed when a coach from a tiny Texas town started 5 black players on the court during the NCAA championship game against an all-white team from Kentucky. Hollywood made a movie about it, and one of the players is now coaching and changing kids' lives at a Rockland County high school. Justin Walters introduces us to Coach Willie Worsley.
Fella, let's not give up a lead first quarter, okay? Let's go, let's win, have some fun. Hard work. 1, 2, 3. Hard work.
If there's one thing Willie Worsley knows, it's basketball.
Get out here, Jeremiah! Jeremiah! You gotta come around him.
He may only stand at 5'6", but is considered a giant in the game of college basketball. Worsley rarely speaks about his historic accomplishments, and for the most part is just known to his Spring Valley players as coach.
I was scared to accept that. Being a legend, being in history, that's a big thing.
Worsley, now at 76 years old, proudly admits he is black history. 56 years ago, he was a member of the iconic 1966 Texas Western team that won the NCAA championship against an all-white Kentucky club. It's the first time an all-black starting 5 team won a title. Willie, who started in that game, says after the historic win, his team wasn't truly recognized or honored until a decade later.
So even in that year, months after the game, it didn't hit you, we made history as the first quote-unquote black starting 5.
No.
10 years later.
10 years later.
Willie believes the true story behind Texas Western's 1966 championship run has changed over the years. Hollywood played a role in that.
Coach Haskins is starting 5 black players, a first in NCAA championship history.
In 2006, Disney Studios turned the Miners' 1966 championship win into a movie called Glory Road. It was built up as a David versus Goliath matchup. This small school from El Paso, Texas, versus an all-white Kentucky team.
We had a swag, but you know what bothered us? We got no respect at all.
The details surrounding that 1966 showdown between Kentucky and Texas Western, now known as UTEP, have been slightly altered. But one thing that is indisputable is the racism Worsley and his teammates experienced that season.
And I'm the number 1 person to go out on the court. Some of them urinate on me and throw Coke, Coke, that's Coke syrup was sticky, you know what I mean? And I'm from South Bronx, so I'm a fighter. The bigger you are, the more I'm gonna go at you.
But late Hall of Fame coach Don Haskins redirected that anger, helping Worsley to find resilience and purpose.
All the little kids, you can fight them? No, coach, ain't not like that. He said, you wanna beat them at the scoreboard.
Since 1985, Worsley has been putting Haskins' mantra in play as Spring Valley's basketball coach. The only sign of his past sits right here in this trophy case outside the gym. But if it was up to Worsley, he would remove his jersey from the display. To him, his life and legacy should be judged by what he's doing now, not what he did more than half a century ago.
Help! Rebound!
Next, how a New York Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright is pumping up the volume of black voices on stage and behind the scenes.
A lawyer and civil rights activist, Thurgood Marshall's 1954 landmark case of Brown versus Board of Education led to the Supreme Court ruling unanimously that racial segregation of children in public schools was unconstitutional. 13 years later, he became the first African-American Supreme Court Justice of the United States.
Welcome back to this Pix 11 special, honoring Black history, mind, body, and soul.
This two-time Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright is changing the face of American theater with her complicated characters of color and meaningful storylines that take on important social issues. Shirley Chan sat down with Lynn Nottage to talk about her stage successes and her efforts to bring more diversity to the industry.
From an opera to a Broadway play and a musical. All three are the works of acclaimed playwright Lynn Nottage, and all three projects premiered this year alone. The first and only woman to win the Pulitzer Prize for Drama twice, Nottage has become a dominant voice in performing arts in an industry where so few Black voices are heard.
There's so many untold stories about Black folks in the past, but also our stories that are happening in real time. And so the hope is that we're at a new moment.
A new moment for some, but it's something Nottage has long been committed to. She's an artist and activist. Social issues are often an inspiration for her work. Set in a truck stop sandwich shop, she wrote Clyde's, with most of the characters being formerly incarcerated kitchen staff looking for a fresh start in life. Clyde's had a months-long run at the Hayes Theater before closing in January.
If you look back at this Broadway season, it's going to go down in history. We have 8 plays that were written by Black folks, and hopefully this is the beginning.
Nottage expanded her talents to a new art form when she adapted her play Intimate Apparel into an opera, now at Lincoln Center's Mitzi E. Newhouse Theater. She has said the smaller venue was chosen to introduce Intimate Apparel and opera to a younger, more diverse audience. Tickets are set aside for many performances for that very group.
Esther was a rare character, and part of the reason I wanted to do it is I wanted to put this ordinary, extraordinary Black woman center stage where I felt she belonged, and I knew that if I didn't do it, no one else was going to do it.
Perhaps drawing the biggest headlines, the recent premiere of the long-awaited NJ the Musical, written by Nottage, about the life and creative process of pop icon Michael Jackson.
I'm part of like a larger movement to bring more diverse voices to Broadway. It's like we have to keep the fight out, and we can't allow ourselves to go backward.
More than ever before, the importance of the Black voice in theater is resonating, and Lynn Nottage is leading the way.
Coming up, she was the first Black woman meteorologist on TV. How this trailblazer made an impact and helped pave the way for women of color. Her inspirational story next.
Honoring Black history, mind, body, soul. Tennis superstar Serena Williams revolutionized women's tennis with her powerful style of play. She has won 23 Grand Slam singles titles, the most by any player in the Open era. Off the court, she is a fashion designer, has opened schools in Kenya, and focuses on investing in companies that embrace diverse leadership and opportunity.
She was not only the first woman to report the weather on TV, but also the first Black on-air meteorologist. June Bacon Bursey became a science reporter and got her big break at a station in Buffalo. Our own meteorologist, Stacey Ann Gooden, sat down with this pioneer's daughter to talk about her mom's lasting legacy.
I saw the years and the work of trying to get on the air, the letters that went out. I mean, this was a process of learning, of accepting denial.
Dale St. Clair remembers her mother, June Bacon Bursey's determination to put her meteorology degree to work in the 1970s.
When she went to WGR as a science reporter, frankly, I was disappointed that we were moving to Buffalo so she could be a science reporter. She had shared this visualization of being a meteorologist, chief meteorologist on TV, and I said, well, that's not it. Why are we going?
She finally got her chance when WGR's chief meteorologist wasn't available for the 6 p.m. newscast. On that day, in 1972, Bacon Bursey's dream came true, becoming the first female TV meteorologist.
Already cold air is still barreling down in the midsection of our country.
Her passion to learn about the environment stemmed from the atomic atomic bombing of Hiroshima in 1945 and trying to understand its impact. Bacon-Bursey attended UCLA to study meteorology and in 1954 became the first Black woman to receive a meteorology degree. She also held positions at the Atomic Energy Commission, National Weather Service, and National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. Prompted by her daughter's school science fair, she co-founded the American Meteorological Society's Board on Women and Minorities.
When she stood there and watched me and met other engineers and other judges, she went to the AMS and suggested that she be their rep.
The board encouraged others to pursue a career in STEM, solidifying her mark in the industry. And to honor Bacon-Bursey's work, the American Meteorological Society renamed its award after her mom.
It's an incredible honor to be recognized by your peers. There's no greater honor.
Her impact still making a difference not only on an industry, but her daughter and future scientists.
My mother always said, you can have 10 careers. A profession is what encouraged me, and she did dedicate herself to.
Next, we are catching up with two history sleuths of sorts who've made it their mission to uncover the untold history of African Americans in their small town in New Jersey. That's coming up after the break.
A simple girl from West Virginia who loved to count, Katherine Johnson went on to become one of NASA's most inspirational figures. Her mathematical brilliance marked the turning point in the United States space program. Johnson's accomplishments helped inspire the book Hidden Figures, which went on to become a hit movie.
You can call them Hopewell's history detectives. Two women and longtime friends now on a mission to preserve the overlooked African-American history in their New Jersey hometown. Andrew Ramos spoke with the pair about what they've uncovered and what they're doing with their valuable finds.
Just from the images I was seeing, Black Samba with the big red lips and the lady with the headscarf, and and the way that people made the Black people look like they were happy to be serving white people.
It was early on in her childhood that Elaine Buck recognized that something wasn't right with the way history was being taught at her school. Buck, along with her longtime friend Beverly Mills, grew up in Hopewell Township, a small, predominantly white town in central New Jersey.
We never learned that there was slavery in New Jersey. You're walking in an area, living in an area, growing up in an area where enslaved people walk before you.
The women, now both historians, wound up making some history of their own. In 2006, they successfully stopped a developer from paving a driveway over an unmarked African-American burial ground in a nearby town. That catapulted the two into digging into the community's long-lost African-American history.
We're descendants of these people. Those are our ancestors.
Over the course of a decade, the duo compiled research, shared their discoveries with local schools, and eventually published a book called If These Stones Could Talk. It outlines the African-American journey in central New Jersey.
Without this free labor, where would this very, very wealthy central New Jersey be? It's not a Black thing, it's not a white thing, it's our American history, and you have to know it.
Throughout their journey, these history detectives received town artifacts from complete strangers.
We have people that come up to us and say, first off, I know the name of the people you're talking about, and then second off, here's something that I think you might want because it's connected to your work.
So we started to collect stuff.
We can't keep it in our house.
Well, it was in our house.
Yeah, it was in my house, and we thought we need a place to, to house this.
That place would be the quaint Mount Zion AME Church in Skillman, which was no longer holding weekly services and now housing these pieces of local history. In 2018, they opened the Stoutsburg-Sauerland African American Museum. And the museum, which has been closed since March of 2020 due to the pandemic, is currently under renovation and gearing up for a grand reopening this spring.
We're not going to be silenced. We're not going to pull back from our story because someone might feel offended or hurt.
The women are still on a mission to unearth and chronicle the contributions and legacy of the African American community in Hopewell, and they show no signs of slowing down.
Thanks so much for joining us for this Pix 11 special, Black History, Mind, Body, and Soul. From the Schomburg Center in Harlem, I'm Kori Chambers.